Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iowa Summer Writing Festival 11th Hour Lecture Series. My name is Margaret LeMay, and I'm the Associate Director for the festival and Curator of the 11th Hour Series. We are very happy you've all joined us today, both on-site and online. Thank you. We hope you will enjoy a great discussion over the next hour. Today's lecture is co-sponsored by the University of Iowa Summer Writing Festival and the Iowa Writers Workshop. The Iowa Summer Writing Festival offers 120 week-long and weekend non-credit creative writing classes in June and July. Our courses have no application process. You need only a desire to write. And each summer, we join the International Writing Program, the Nonfiction Writing Program, the Playwrights Workshop, the Translation Workshop, the Iowa Young Writers Studio, many other excellent endeavors, and the Iowa Writers Workshop in welcoming writers of all ages to Iowa City. The Iowa Writers Workshop was the first MFA degree-granting creative writing program in the country. We are very honored that Director Samantha Chang and 4 recent workshop graduates are here with us today to discuss the MFA at any age. Is there a right time to get your MFA? What is it like to attend graduate school earlier or later in life? What is it like to be in workshop? And indeed, what is the MFA experience at different ages and life stages? Samantha Chang, Tamika Cage-Conley, Tom Corcoran, Sasha Kamilnik, and Kevin Smith are here to share their thoughts. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Samantha Chang. I'm director of the Writers Workshop, and we're very excited to be holding this panel thanks to the Summer Writing Festival. So first, I'd like each of the panelists, I'm the moderator, I'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what brought you to the MFA program at the Iowa Writers Workshop and why you came when you did. So how old were you when you decided to apply, and what made it feel like the right time for you?
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Tamika Cage-Conley. I was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, and after I received my PhD from Louisiana State University in English, my dissertation was a discourse analysis of the female circumcision debate across 3 continents. And I ended up teaching African American literature and world literature at Bucknell University. I met my husband toward the end of my time there, moved to Pittsburgh, had a huge career shift from being, and salary shift, to be honest with you, from being a visiting assistant professor at Bucknell University to adjuncting in Pittsburgh. Eventually, adjuncting led to another visiting position, and then adjuncting again. And I don't know how much you know about what it means sometimes to be an adjunct professor, but sometimes I'm having a good experience here, but sometimes, it was challenging. So at some point I decided I could make just as little money and actually do something I love. And I decided that I would try my hand at pursuing being a professional writer. So I landed a fellowship at the August Wilson Center in Pittsburgh, and then a number of grants and so on and so on. And then I became pregnant and had a child. And by this point, I had started my novel, which I used to apply here to get into the workshop. And at some point, I realized that because of the demands of being a freelance artist, which I was at that time, I was working freelance and working as a contractor, and I was a new mother, I realized that it would take me probably a decade at least to finish my novel as a mom, even with a supportive partner as I have. So I thought, what do I need to get this novel finished? I need time and money. That means I need institutional support. Where can I get that? Oh, an MFA program. that seems like a logical thing to do. So I applied, and that's how I found myself here. I was 39 years old when I started, and friends were saying, "You have a PhD, why are you getting another degree?" And I thought, you know so little about what it requires to actually live as a writer. I certainly wanted an MFA in order to re-enter the collegiate workforce, to teach creative writing, which is not something I can do. Even with a PhD in English, you still need an MFA to do that in creative writing. And I also wanted to finish my book before my son went to high school. And so I thought this would be a great way to try my hand at that. So I was really beyond excited when Sam called and told me I had gotten in. I told her my stomach was in my ankles, and it really was. It's true. So.
Hello, my name is Kevin Smith. In 2013, I was 48 years old, and I decided to apply to the Iowa Writers Workshop because I had been spending many years working on my own, living in a very isolated rural community without much community, and I decided that what I really needed was community. I had thought about doing a low residency MFA, and then the more I thought about it, I thought, no, I really want to immerse myself with other writers who are just as passionate as I am about sentences and paragraphs and stories and characters. So I wanted community and I wanted mentors. I share some history with Tamika. I was an academic. I taught French literature and had that career and decided to leave that to pursue my own creative writing. And I also, for several years, thought, I don't want to go back to school. I have so many degrees. I have so much education. But it really, there was a period when I realized I'm not getting what I need and I'm not where I want to be, and I need help. And so I spent a year working on 3 pieces that I felt comfortable submitting to this program, and I went to 2 summer writing conferences, Tin House and the Lambda Literary Retreat, and just immersed myself, spent a year preparing to apply to this program. And when I arrived, I was 50 years old. So one of the great experiences of my life was being in this program.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Corcoran, and I was 50 years ago this summer in Chicago writing my first novel. Those of you who remember Chicago in 1968 know what a horrible experience that was. But I was in my own little world writing this novel on a Royal Portable typewriter on yellow legal foolscap, 300 pages worth, and I had a ball. It was just a great, great experience. The novel, unfortunately, was terrible, and I've since discarded it. But the bug had bitten, as I can see it's bitten all of you too. And so I kept at it, and over the years, through a very productive and meaningful Navy career, I'd find time to write. And so by about 2011, I had written 11 novels and a volume of short stories, each of which was kind of incrementally better than the one before, none of which were suitable for publication, although I had an agent and we had some optimistic thoughts about it. But I got to 2011 and I realized really you need to make a change. And the superficial nature or the superficial description of the change would be, okay, you need someone to read your work and help you clean it up, or you need to learn a few more tricks of the trade, or you need to get that seal of approval of a top-notch program that will open doors for you with agents and editors so you don't have to write any more query letters. And of course all of that was appealing, but I didn't actually think that's what I needed. Really, if you do anything long enough, you get reasonably good at it. So by novel 8 or 9, I was technically pretty competent, and I had an agent, and I'd had some near misses. So what I really needed was the pith of it all, the educational part of the workshop. I needed to know, why do I want to write in the first place, which by then was a daily habit, and what is it that I want to say to the world, and what's my best voice for saying it, and how can I, who am a fairly solitary person who believes his own thoughts are emanations of truth that the whole world should follow, how can I turn that around a little bit and put myself in the position of the reader, and not just write to have somebody turn the page, but write so that a reader will really be moved. And that's what I needed when I came here. So my wife, my dear, lovely wife, said, you're going to apply to Iowa because that's the best program. And if you get in, we're going. So like Kevin, I got together maybe some older materials than Kevin's. And at the age of 63, we packed up our truck and moved here to Iowa City, and we're here for 2 years. And I got all those things. It wasn't just training, it really was an education. And it has really changed the way I look at my own writing, the way I look at literature, the way I read. And probably as a less fortunate sidelight, I can now predict who done it on all the BBC murder mysteries, because I know when the writers trying to increase the value of the character before they kill him and that kind of thing. But all that internal stuff, the quiet moments, and why do we write? Iowa helped answer that for me.
Hello, my name's Sasha. I was 30 when I applied and 31 when I came to the workshop, so I'm the younger side of this conversation. And my story was somewhat simple in that I graduated from college having never even considered being a writer or thought that that was something I could do, and then I moved to New York and had various jobs and had I was a project manager and a stage manager and a user experience designer. I sort of was on a career path of working in large companies and writing a lot of emails. But I, in New York City, encountered writers and realized that writing a lot of emails was sort of a depressing thing to be doing, and started writing in my free time and taking these sort of little adult education types of classes. And at some point, I realized that I cared enough about that part of my life that I wanted time, and that was mostly what I wanted. I wanted time to not be writing emails, to not be working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And some what I was hoping I would come to the workshop to find was some sense of what kind of writing I was most interested in, what kind of work I wanted to do, and have the time to figure that out. So that's my story.
Thanks, everyone. Can you all talk, each of you talk briefly about the experience that you had at the workshop? You talked a little bit about what you hoped to get out of being there, but what would you say is the most valuable thing that you did get out of it in the end?
So I've been very fortunate to have outstanding mentors here. So I felt at once very seen and understood as a human being who was also a novelist. And so it hasn't just been about my novel, though certainly it has. I have tools that I just didn't possess before I came here. And probably one of the most exciting things was when I started to see myself do things that I couldn't do before, and then to know to do it, to have the instinct and the awareness and the education and the tools to make something work narratively. I thought, oh, this, like, I knew I would learn coming here. I mean, it's the writer's workshop, right? But it's another thing when you're actually embodying it as an experience and you can see yourself manifesting something new and different. And so much better that you're almost thinking, oh, I did that, right? So the sense of accomplishment is very powerful and dynamic. And just an extension of that, as I said before, is the outstanding faculty. I mean, I can't remember, I mean, in graduate school before, I had really great teachers, but the level of time spent, the level of belief, almost like, you know, you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're doing, and you can do this well, you can make a living at this, being a writer, being a teacher of writing. Sam was my first workshop instructor. I don't want to embarrass her, but I felt extremely encouraged, validated, and seen by her. And I keep their marks on my manuscript, so I have everyone's marginalia, and that's pretty exciting. There's no one in the world like Margot Livesey, just no one. She's an angel, she's brilliant, she's soaring, she gives so much of herself, and she really has become a mentor and a friend. I look up to her in life, and I look up to her in my work, and the same is true for Sam. The visiting professors are really outstanding. I just can't say enough the endless reward of that. So I'm a better writer. And specifically, when I came here, I was only interested in being a novelist. But I've become a short story writer too. I've had a short story accepted into VQR, and I'm really excited about that, really thrilled. And that's just something I never knew would happen. So to find a whole new stroke for yourself as an artist, that's something that I entirely had to come here to find, because I didn't think I wanted to, or that I could necessarily. So it's been rewarding and a blessing on so many levels.
Before coming to Iowa, I didn't have much in the way of experience of creative writing classes or workshops. So my 4 workshops were all very powerful, outstanding peers and faculty, and just great experiences. There's this incredible intimacy that can grow out of the workshop experience that leads to friendships that then go outside of the workshop. And if I think about what was most valuable for me, it's those friendships that were grown from seeds in those workshop conversations where people are really taking one another's writing very, very seriously, with a lot of thought and care and respect, and guided by brilliant mentors, like you mentioned. I mean, my teachers were Marilyn Robinson and Paul Harding, Sam Chang, Margot Livesey, and Ayanna Mathis. I mean, I just had the most amazing teachers. And from that environment, from that soil, the community that I was hungering for, that I was really wanting to help nourish my own writing practice, grew. And so it's those friendships, I think, that now continue, 2 years since I've graduated, that has been the most meaningful to me.
I would heartily second everything that Tamika and Kevin have said about the experience generally, and I had all of that too. I would say specifically, there are 2 things really stand out to me now. One was sitting, not in a workshop, but in an actual, just ordinary academic course on Faulkner, and another one on Moby Dick, taught by Marilyn Robinson. And when she had done teaching for the day, she would go off on flights of philosophy that had all of us just floating out of the Conroy reading room afterward. And one of the things she said, which was really important to me, was the human brain is the most complex object in the universe. Your own human brain is infinitely unique, multiply that times your infinitely unique life experience. And right now, if you do absolutely nothing else, you will be the only you that there will ever be in the universe. So don't try to write like anyone else. Find who you are, what you want to say, what bothers you in the world, and put that into fiction. And yeah, I floated out of the room that day, and that's been really important to me ever since. The other more practical thing, which I never expected to find, was we read, as I assume you're doing during the festival, a fairly stiff amount of prose every week. I probably worked on it about 20 hours, and then you write a letter to the person who's submitting, and you say what you think about it. Well, writing that letter kind of commits you to a position, and then you go into the workshop, and you hear what everybody else thinks about that manuscript, and it makes you really test your position, and in that way, broaden or sharpen, or in some cases entirely change your views. And so that experience of attending the workshop when we were workshopping somebody else's work was actually more valuable to me than when my own work was being workshopped, even though it was very, very satisfying and educational.
I mean, all of those things sound entirely true and resonant. So I third or fourth or whatever, all of the things that have been said. But if I think about sort of very specifically what happened, is that I just had time to sit with myself for a very long time, and that somehow it like changed all kinds of things about how I look at the world, what my writing does. So I mean, you guys have already said all the things that are wonderful about being in the actual workshop. But for me, probably the most life-changing part was that I got to step out of this life that I was living that was sort of preordained on rails in some way, and figure out what I think about the world and what I think about writing. And yeah, so that was the most life-changing part for me.
Thanks. So this next question is specifically about age diversity and I'm curious to hear what you all are going to say. I mean, frankly, I didn't ask anybody what they were going to say in advance of this panel, and I'm really curious about this question because there are a lot of people in your classes who are in their 20s. It's just that time of life when some people feel mobile enough to apply to a place that requires them to move to, Iowa City. And I want to know, in all honesty, so what was your experience in classes like? Were the classes very varied in age? How was it having people discuss your work, et cetera? Do you want to start? Should we start on this end this time? Because I feel like Sasha has to be clean up all this.
Sure.
And you're like closer to the age of the youngest students, but
I
not.
felt pretty average, but I also, I mean, this is the thing that I think was most, specifically the thing about the workshop that was most surprising to me was how much it mattered to me that everybody in my workshops was doing something completely different in a completely different style in a completely different world, and everyone was coming from a different place, and that the way that workshops are set up is you read each other's writing and everybody gets to be whoever it is they are, and that was sort of a thing that I found inspiring and freeing. I found it so freeing. I adored the fact that I felt to me like there was a fair amount of diversity in my MFA experience, and in part maybe because I ended up being friends with sort of folks who were older than me, and I found that incredibly rewarding. But what I think is fascinating is that I didn't think about it that much, that everybody was just the individual person that they were, and that was sort of, you got to know them through their writing, and you got to know them as a person, and I never sort of, I loved that there was diversity. I didn't think about it, didn't expect sort of that, and found it delightful that it seemed to just sort of happen naturally, that we were all humans together.
Tom, specifically, if you were you ever the oldest person in the room? And if so, what did that feel like?
I think I was always the oldest person in the room.
The oldest student?
The oldest student. I was 25 years older than the next oldest student at the workshop. And same as indicated, the culture is definitely young, around that young median. Professionally, it didn't make any difference at all. We were 10, 12 people all gathered around a piece of work that was very important to us, giving our best opinion as people of varying backgrounds, and all the feedback that I received and all the feedback that I saw others receive was totally professional and hopeful, and even the astringent things were said in a way that was totally constructive throughout. It's more of an effort if you're older to go to the after parties. I remember very well, and I didn't go to very many after parties, but there's a listserv, which is a way of communicating. And one Sunday morning, I can say this because it was from a poet, and none of us are poets here. Somebody posted on the listserv a question: does anyone know how I got home from the party last night? I'm serious. And I thought, well, it's been a long time since I haven't known how I got home from a party last night. So culturally, there was, I won't call it a divide, but I had to put myself out there and take a real interest in things that, my children are all older than most of the average student. So I had to kind of go through that experience again of kind of liking the Police and U2 and that kind of thing. There is, as a caveat, or there has been for me, kind of a side effect of all this, and it reminds me of a sign I used to see in the Navy occasionally, and when I'd go on board a ship, and the sign would say, "Marriages performed by the captain are valid for the duration of this voyage only." And so I went out of my way to serve my fellow workshoppers, and we had lots of people over for dinner. We took people for dinner. If we saw people who were in some various degrees of trouble, we tried to be helpful with that. And that was all really appreciated, and I think there was definitely a connection made at the workshop. But the voyage was over, and I really haven't heard from those people very much anymore. And I think you have to expect that, because life goes on, and life is for the young, and I think everybody is so busy that people aren't going to just stop in their busy lives and say, I wonder what Tom Corcoran's up to these days. So it's fine.
Kevin?
Yes. So I think for me, one of the most beneficial aspects of workshop was the intergenerational connection that I encountered. And I do think that whatever generation you're born into is incredibly, has a very big impact on one's nature, on one's identity. What's going on in history, what's going on in culture, what's going on in technology. It shapes the way we look at the world. And there are ways in which those identities that are formed can harden as we get older, and it can be harder to see across generational divides. I think it's worth, acknowledging that. And it can seem like people who are 20 or 30 years younger. It's like, what are they doing? You know, it's crazy. And they might look at me and think, or, you know, or people older than me, you know, what are they doing? It's crazy. So I think if, you know, coming together around a shared task, which is what Workshop provides, in my experience, gives a way to move through those divisions of generation. And I developed friendships that I still have today that are incredibly important to me. Actually, you know, several of them young writers in their 20s who have just become very dear to me. And so, and it has to, I think it has to do with shared affinities and the affection that was cultivated in Workshop. I also experienced some sort of shock coming from, as I mentioned earlier, this very quiet, rural, isolated, you know, in the woods environment to this town where there's, you know, a lot of activity on weekends around partying and the football. And my first semester was a little rocky in that regard because it was hard for me to find my footing. And I did want to socialize with friends. That's important to me. I like to be with people, and I like to feel like I belong to the community. So it took me a while to find my way, sort of what was going to work for me in terms of the social scene that is part of the Workshop environment. But over the course of the 4 semesters, I found my way, and it was through developing real friendships, not sort of accidental friendships, but finding people who really cared about me and I really cared about them. And as I said, that was, you know, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and people who are open to not just seeing the person's age, but connecting to the individual. You know, I actually have enjoyed this opportunity to make friendships with people who different ages than mine.
It's interesting to me that I asked about what it was like to be in class with people, but I'm hearing outside of class. I'm hearing about life outside of class. And I think that part of being in this program that's different from being in a low-res program is that you actually live in town with the people that you go to class with, and it all gets mixed into sort of an experience that takes place in and out of class. Tamika?
So, my classmates are some of the best readers I've encountered often. So what the experience for me is that sometimes the people who were very young, I'm thinking about one person in particular who is now a very good friend of mine. I mean, what was he, 24 when he came into the workshop? And just so we were in Sam's workshop together in my first semester. He was so extremely well read, and he still remains one of my best readers. So even though he was, 24, 25 at the time, the wisdom that he had as a respondent to fiction was really quite dynamic because he was prepared. You know, you get socially, the social scene is very different. I mean, I have a little sister here. She's 20, just turned 25. And it gives me a chance to live out the part of me that still thinks I'm 23. I mean...
She's not your sister.
No. She's not my real sister. You know what I mean? Like she's become like a sister. We were in the same class together, and we've had 2 workshops together. And she was also wrote me some of the best letters because they're also the way that she speaks. So it would be sometimes a bunch of emojis, which is great. I mean, like, who doesn't want that in a workshop letter? It's a great way to feel encouraged. And, you know, so I feel like there's just an opportunity to find a certain spirit of I'm going to say the word, I don't know, it's not so much equality, I mean, but you can find footing with people no matter what ages you are, because you've arrived to this town with a common goal, and also, even if those goals aren't identical, it still is the case that you have to turn in a manuscript for workshop. So that's something that everybody has to do, and there is a spirit of rallying around to be helpful to people, and I think that has been consistent regardless of whether or not people are 22 or in their 40s or 50s.
If you were managing a family life or with a partner before you came here, what was the hardest part of sustaining your life with them while you were devoting time to your work and your life here in the program?
So I think if my partner and I had come here, just the two of us, if we didn't have a child, it might have been different. But I mean, balancing childcare, because when we moved here, our son was 2 years old, and he was in daycare half-time. And so that meant that my husband was taking care of him for a considerate amount of time. And then I would fill in as I was able to. So I think the biggest part is trying to balance between not making my partner feel like his life was just our child while I had this very instant community. That was probably the biggest challenge of him feeling like, oh, well, you're into the cool kids now. You know what I mean? So that was really hard. So sometimes, especially my first semester, I went to all the readings. I thought that was really important. I thought it was really important to dream build, to see myself in, not just in that position as a writer, of course. I want to do a reading at, oh, well, I have done a reading at Prairie Lights. But like with the book though, like it's different. You know what I mean? But I went to those because I mean, it's part of the community to do that. And then also, you never know what someone is going to say that's going to be helpful for you the next day, the next week, years down the line. So I thought those things were really important. And I remember one night he said, do you have to go to all these readings? And I said, yes, I do. And at that time I did, frankly. I didn't go to so many my second semester, and even less my third, and even less my fourth, because the work intensifies once you're a second year. So I did pull back on that. But at the time it was necessary. But it was very difficult to help someone who is not necessarily in the workshop while we have a child, that everything I'm doing is as important as everything else. I would say that was the biggest challenge. So now I'm here for a third year as the Provost Visiting Writer Fellow in Fiction, and I'm excited because I do feel like there's a little bit of breathing room, and also an opportunity for him to really see how hard that I've been working, that it hasn't just been, okay, well, there are other people I like better than you. Do you know what I mean?
When I came here, so I came to Iowa from California, and my husband remained in California, and it was hard. It was hard for him, and it was hard for me, and hard for us. We did the best we could in terms of visiting one another back and forth and finding towns in between to visit. And I don't really have a great, articulate, perfect sentence to talk about just how hard it was. So I'll just say that it was really hard.
You went to Des Moines for a getaway, didn't you?
I did that often, yeah. Yeah.
Nice to have a more private life. This is the smallish town.
Correct.
So we were here without children, our children all being grown. My wife is a printmaker, and Iowa has a wonderful printmaking program, so she was able to do that. And she worked at the IMU catering kitchen as a chef other times. So she stayed busy, but as Tamika says, it's a balancing act to be sure that this fabulously rich experience you're having is not coming at the expense of the ordinary life that your loved one is having, and I had to pull back too.
Pass. I did not have a family, except to say that it's been really lovely to get to know people's families and their children, and to feel that this community is big enough to sort of include all of those people, and it's been great.
So I want to make sure we have time for y'all to ask questions. Where's the mic? Is that situation set up? Okay. Who has questions? We'll take any questions. There's one in the back.
I just want to say that I just want to tell everybody that, as Tamika said, this is where the writers are the cool kids. That's not true everywhere, believe me.
People don't always feel cool when they're in the program.
Sam, do you think my son is too young for the program?
He has to be of voting age, I suppose, or legal age. Actually, we've had students who were underage and were not allowed to drink alcohol when they started the program. Yes, really young college grads. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it's kind of complicated for them. We check up on them.
Thanks. Hi. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the process of getting into the program, and what your experience was, how long it took, what you had to do to prepare for it.
So the applications are due beginning the 1st of November until
December 15th is the new deadline.
New deadline.
Yeah, I think it might be October 1st now. We moved it up because we needed more time to read them.
I don't think that change probably will have affected my experience, but yes, get them in early, and if you're not satisfied with the outcome, resubmit. So I had several stories that I thought might work, but the focus of having to meet the deadline really helped a lot, and so starting about 6 months before, the ideas just began to flow, and even though I'm a pretty dedicated writer, I'm sure there have been many opportunities when a brilliant idea has come to me and I haven't written it down or gotten up out of bed to make a note of it or something like that. This time I didn't do that. I just worked on them. It used to be about 80 pages of manuscript, and admission was strictly based on the strength of that written submission. And perhaps Sam was the right one to talk about it, but it's immensely fair and equitable. If you get in, 7 people have read your work, including 2 faculty members, including 5 faculty members. And if you don't get in, 3 people have read your work, and it's been discussed with many more than that. So start early. When you've got an idea that really glows brightly for you, write it down and begin to work on that, and polish and hope for the best.
Tom, how did you had a large body of work at the point when you applied. How did you curate your manuscript? Because actually 80 is about max, so most people turn in, say, 40. The one requirement we have is that you turn in more than one piece. You can't have one piece that you've been working on since you were a toddler. Well, it happens. So how did you curate, out of all of that work?
I had just finished a novel the year before, which seemed like it was in pretty good shape. So I think I took the first 40 pages of that, and then I wrote 2 short stories to go with it. And the subject matter all kind of complemented themselves pretty well, but also showed a range. One was set on the western slope of Colorado, about civilians. One was about a former veteran going back to Vietnam, and one was about a currently serving officer. And my wife read and made suggestions on all that. But I think just stockpile as much as you can, and when you really feel you've got material worth seeing, that'll be the time to submit.
That's so interesting to me because I do receive a lot of applications from people who are in college, they majored in creative writing, they wrote maybe 3 stories while they were in college, and they submit 2 of them. And it sounds to me like you submitted a slender fraction of the amount of work that you had actually written and even polished when you applied here. And it was a very successful application. It's interesting. Okay, anyone else?
I'll just say that I looked at the program website in December of 2012, and it said, 80 to 100 pages, and I said, I don't have 1 page that I'm ready to submit. So I just gave myself a whole year to work on pieces. And the one piece of advice that I might offer would be to show your work to other writers. I highly recommend summer writing conferences. The one, like Tin House or Napa Valley or this one. Yes, right. Where you'll get feedback, and you can really work on your pieces. Just work as hard as you can on those pieces to submit. Because people can tell when the readers can tell when work has been really treated with care.
It was important to me to submit a piece that I felt had a narrative arc and that could show that I could hold tension, that I could think about, that had a heart, that had something. And to be honest with you, I was only working on a novel, so it was that or nothing. I didn't have anything else. I'm also a poet, but I wanted to work on an MFA in fiction. So I would say that in addition to being focused on the most polished manuscript that you can submit, also one that has something very memorable that is happening, as memorable and as magical as you can make it, that actually has a human expression, from heart and soul. I think that's really important. Those are the pieces that still have remained with me the most that I've read here, my 2 years in the workshop.
No,
Any other questions? Yeah.
This might be a question directed a bit at Kevin and Tamika in particular. Really interested to hear about people who've been college professors and have PhDs and then come, that's my situation. And I guess I'm curious, what is it like to go from being a professor to reoccupy the student role? That's a shift that, when I think about something like this, looms as large to me as age in the abstract.
I love learning, so I love being a student, and I've been very happy to shed my experience as a teacher of and that identity, and just to become a sponge. What's really, I think, the thing that I want to say before this panel ends that is really important to me on this topic is that there can be a lot of people get very hung up on, young is better than old, or, this group of people is better than that group of people. And in terms of age, I think that sometimes people think that as they get older, they lose value as a human being. And it's so important for me to, everybody has value at whatever age. And so, the fact that I have a PhD in French literature is not something that I feel gives me an advantage here. I came here to learn and to be open and to receive and then hopefully to contribute. I actually had to overcome some of my academic training in order to develop as a fiction writer, because the tools that I developed as an academic are not the same tools that I needed to be able to develop character, to develop story. Sometimes I knew what my project, as an academic, I knew what I wanted my project to be before I even sat down to write it. And that's not always necessarily the most helpful attitude when writing fiction. Fiction can be, at least for myself, such a process of discovery. So I actually needed time to release my academic training in order to truly develop as a writer of fiction.
So I see it, thank you for that question too, by the way. There's very much a continuation of experience for me. I just saw it as the next stage of what it means to be a scholar. I actually felt that all the years I spent reading helped me to think more clearly about writing fiction. Even though I had a similar experience as Kevin did, where I would say probably wasn't until, probably my last semester at the workshop that I started to feel that I was reading more like a fiction writer and less like an academic, because was a very big difference. I mean, reading for theme, reading on a critical level versus reading as a craftswoman, right? It's a very different experience. Reading fiction to learn how to do something as a writer versus reading and saying, oh, I understand thematically what this writer is trying to accomplish. I understand critically, exactly, right? So that really did take a lot of effort and a lot of work. And again, Margot Livesey was really amazing at that, because she would open every workshop with a mini craft lecture. And she also has written on the book, The Hidden Machinery, about craft. And I go to that book again and again. So, I've learned how to, and honestly, a lot of what we're talking about here, the stakes were so high for me, I felt, like uprooting my family from Pittsburgh and moving here. So I felt that the fact that I had a PhD to be honest with you, I don't think about it. I don't think about it. I don't know exactly where that degree is. It's somewhere in my apartment right now. I use it the same way I will the MFA here, is based on need, the need for career, the need for job stuff like that. But really, my reasoning for coming here was that I knew that I could become better. So if there was any way I sought to use my former experience as a professor, it was in hopes to help my peers in their vision as writers in the crafts that they were attempting.
Thanks. I think we have time for another question. Oh, whose hand? Oh.
Two short questions. What is the acceptance rate, and what is the age of the oldest person ever admitted?
The acceptance rate is about, let's see, is it 0.025 of the people who apply get in around, sometimes it's between there and .03, depending on the year and the number of applications we receive. So it's not easy to get in, but people get in, and people get in when they apply more than once. People get in when they apply multiple times, and it's not like we give them points for applying more than once. It's just that they get better, and then, they get in. And then the other question was oldest. So I've only been director for 12 and a half years. So during my time as director, the oldest person who got in was in her late 60s. No, maybe she was 70. And she's wonderful. I would have invited her here, but I felt like she has family things going on right now. She was just, it's interesting. She really adapted to being here in this wonderful way, and would come back repeatedly to visit classes and to sit in on lectures, and we miss her right now. Is there anything else? Let's see, we done? Yeah, I think our time is up, and thank you so much for coming. It's been a huge pleasure to be able to talk to you.
And also, hi guys, thank you very much to our panel. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, workshop alumni. Iowa Summer Writing Festival participants, thank you so much for coming to listen to this talk. I think that as I was sitting listening to, and thank you so much to all of you on the internet who are watching us, that's fantastic. It's wonderful to contemplate that. I think that what I was thinking as a writer and as a poet, and on behalf of the Iowa Summer Writing Festival and the university, what a huge generosity there was in this room, and from the panel, and from each of you. We are so many different ages. You love to be in a room when people from different experiences, with different life experience, are talking about something in common, which is our love for writing. So thank you so much for joining us for that.